catch things on the rising tide, you're doomed to success.
She wanted to be known as a trailblazer. As any good criminal, she was thinking several moves ahead.
America in the early 70s, anybody could be anything they wanted to be. I've got a mother of 5 who's invented a car. Is she famous? No, but she's going to be.
I'm going to knock the hell out of Detroit.
She thought that she would be the next Henry Ford.
It's a situation of David fighting Goliath.
She was afraid of spies from the big three.
There was a briefcase full of cash, and next to it, the .357 Magnum revolver.
It was a house of cards.
Law enforcement agencies started taking a closer look, and the press turned on her and said, this is a scam.
When they couldn't decide if the car was real or not, they started focusing on Liz. She was on trial as a trans person.
When the police started swarming in the house, they got her because she came back to say goodbye to her kids.
She was ahead of her time. She knew the pain.
She took it upon herself to defend herself in front of the jury. This is a woman who knew how to inspire.
She was one of those people that could sell anything.
The defendant has been charged with a plot to murder some of the witnesses.
It was just crazy. Someone started shooting.
This person was totally unknown until she showed up in Los Angeles promoting a three-wheel car. Who the hell was she? People need a hero. That's what America's all about.
This is Teresa Perkins, the editor and host of Exposure Spotlight Magazine, where your voice matters. Truly, it is an honor and a privilege to be in the midst of a great, wonderful person. He is the executive producer. He is a filmmaker out of Hollywood, California. And not only that, he just produced this wonderful film called Lady and the Dale. So ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome the one and the only executive producer, Andre Gaines. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine. And thank you so much for being here. It is, like I said, it is definitely a privilege and an honor to be able to ask you some questions that other people, have an interest in knowing more about your film and knowing more about you. I mean, because you're doing some great things. So let's start off with this. Can you give us a synopsis of your film, your HBO series called Lady and the Dale?
That's right. Yeah. So it's a 4-part series called The Lady and the Dale. And it's about a very unusual woman, a transgender woman, actually, in the 1970s named Liz Carmichael. And she built a car called the Dale. It was a 3-wheel car. It was supposed to go 70 miles to the gallon. And this was during the Jimmy Carter years, where there was a huge gas shortage in the United States. And this car was supposed to solve that. It was an independent car that she made by raising money from people and was supposed to go up against the big 3 automakers, GM, Chrysler, and Ford. And prior to, becoming a transgender woman, when she was presenting male in her previous life, there was a lot of criminal activity, frankly. It was a lot of multiple wives and tons of kids and living in one city after the other and one state after the other and really, operating as a con artist. But she found the best version of herself, which was as an entrepreneur, and was trying to make a legitimate car. But her criminal past was really, following her. And this story, which happens, over a 4-episode limited series on HBO, is really about that journey from the time that she was born, really up to the time that she developed this car. And then ultimately she did pass away in late 2005. So that's ultimately the story of the series.
Wow, that is so wonderful. But how did you end up deciding to write on this particular, story and on her? I mean, I think this is wonderful. I mean, because me personally, I have never heard of her.
Yeah.
And it is based on a true story, correct?
It is. It's a true story. I never heard of her prior to it showing up at my doorstep. The director, Nick Camilleri, who's one of the co-directors, the other director is Zachary Drucker. And Nick had been working on this project for probably about 8 years prior to it showing up to my doorstep. He had been doing an enormous amount of research. And he forewarned us, when he brought this project to myself and my partner, Alan Bain, and said, you're not going to be able to type this in on Google and find like a whole ton of stuff. That's one of the first things that anytime you mention a project to somebody or somebody pitches something to you, one of the first things we do as producers is we just, go online and try to see what we can find. And he was right. You really couldn't find very much about this at all. So, a credit to him putting in the time and effort to really research this. And then we developed it, myself and Alan Bain, we developed the project a little further and then took it to Mark and Jay Duplass, and then ultimately ended up selling it to HBO. So that whole process from the time Nick had started working on it up to the time that it's aired, which is now, was about a 10-year process. We came in there somewhere in the between year 8 and 9 of that process.
Oh wow, that is so wonderful. So Andre, how difficult was it to pitch Dale to HBO? Or would you say was it difficult?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about this project, which is kind of a rare thing in our business, is that the first time it was mentioned to anybody, they had a positive and visceral reaction to it, which is, a rare thing. Normally, if somebody pitches a project to me, or if I pitch a project to someone else to say kind of, hey, here's a script to read, or here's a trailer to look at, or here's a treatment or a deck to take a look at. And you have sort of a waiting period while people get around to looking at the story or the project, and then they get back to you, and there's sort of a period of time in between there. But with this, the minute that it was mentioned to Alan and myself, we saw the potential in it and helped Nick develop it. And the minute that we mentioned it to Mark and Jay Duplass, they were on board. And the minute we mentioned it to HBO, they were on board. So we didn't have to go shopping this project around town to multiple distributors or anything like that. Everybody was into it the minute that they heard it.
Wow. I know you were flabbergasted when they decided to say, yes, we will do this.
Yeah, you can kind of get a feeling when you have something great. And we just had such an amazingly positive reaction to this story the minute that we heard it. We knew it was great. And it requires, normally these projects kind of require a degree of education for people to get involved, but this one just off the pitch was enough for them to say, here's the money, go make it.
Wow. Yeah, like I said, again, that is so awesome, because there's a lot of people out there that would love to be in your footsteps. For sure.
Yeah, I would love to be in my footsteps. It was like I said, it was one of those rare things that kind of came together very quickly. And sometimes projects do that. Other ones you got to work on them for a little while before they finally hit the market. But some of them, like The Lady in the Dale, are just immediately have all of the elements necessary for an amazing story. And the fact that it's true, the fact that it's stranger than fiction, you didn't have to go make it up. Anytime we dug into the story, we just found new and exciting gems, just one after the other. It made for a grand opportunity, and now we finally get to show it to everybody.
Yeah. Would you say that, writing this film and producing it, would you say it gives you a different set of skills in reference to from writing screenplays in directing? Would you say that there is a different type of set of skills that is required?
Yeah, so just for clarity, I'm the executive producer of it, so I didn't actually write the series. We had a director, we have producers, and in some cases writers when it comes to documentaries. And I think that between a scripted film or series and a unscripted documentary film or series, the fundamental basis or foundation is exactly the same. Like, you've got to have a story arc, you got to have a beginning, middle, and end. You've got to have a really, really strong central character, somebody who embodies all of the charisma necessary to maintain the engagement of the audience and keep people's attention. Because there's so much stuff to look at these days. It's like you got to grab people's attention like kind of right away, and you got to have something there to keep their attention. Otherwise, they're going on Facebook or Instagram or flipping to something else on Netflix or YouTube or whatever it is. So there's just so many things that people can pay attention to. And so I think that those fundamentals are still there regardless of a scripted or unscripted project, regardless of a scripted or documentary project. I think the unique set of skills that come from making documentaries is, one, you're kind of an investigative journalist. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the main thing, is that there's just, a lot of digging and digging and digging and digging until you kind of get to what it is that you wanted to achieve. And then just the research part of it. There's some degree of luxury when you're making a scripted film, that you can actually pull from a lot of different sources, like books or articles or documentaries that people have made before, things like that. But really, in the documentary world, so much of it is research based to try to get the facts right and to try to get an accurate story. That's a unique skill that's different than sitting down and writing a script.
Okay. So this film, Lady in the Dale, is about transgender, and you're a black producer, creator. So tell me this, what's really the deal with diversity in Hollywood? And would you feel that changes are being made when it comes to Black producers and creators?
Yeah, I think that the changes are ongoing. That changes are being made in some cases at a faster pace, and in other cases at a snail's pace. And the interesting thing about The Lady in the Dale is that while the central figure of the story is a transgender woman, the story is really not about her being transgender, which I think is a unique paradigm to really kind of focus on, because when the project was brought to me, I'm a true crime lover. A lot of people love true crime stories, scandals and scams and fraud and murder and mayhem and just kind of mystery, all those types of things. That was the first thing that I was really attracted to when hearing of this story. And I think that the unique element was the fact that Liz Carmichael is a transgender woman. It made it a different true crime story than anything that I had ever heard of before. And while her transness was very much part of her identity and it's a focus in the story, it really is I think a byproduct of a larger story, as opposed to it being squarely about that. And then I think, as a Black producer, I end up taking kind of on the burden of all diversity in the room, because our producing rooms, our writing rooms, they're so homogenous in general. Just it's mostly filled with white faces, and largely filled with male white faces, to be more specific. And so I think that as the only Black person in the room, quite often, and I don't know, 8% of the time, to be frank, is I sort of take the mantle proudly to make sure that any insensitivities as it relates, sort of first and foremost as it relates to Black folks, because I'm a Black man, but also as it relates to other diverse groups, whether that be gay community, whether it be the trans community, whether it be women, whoever it is, that I find myself in that position often, is that I'm really the only one that will think of these things, and even bring them up, because I think that, and it's not that, what I've found is that it's not that other producers or writers or directors are like deliberately or inherently insensitive to diversity or diverse voices, multicultural or multisexual voices, whatever orientation of people are, whatever it is. It's just that they're kind of like tone deaf in a way, or unconscious bias, that by virtue of not having friends that don't look like them, or not having family members or colleagues that don't look like them. And so I have to be the diversity police in many respects. I just have to say, like, we can't do that. We got to change that. That's insensitive, and we'll get hammered if we put that on out to the audience and somebody sees that. And I know you think it might be funny, or you might think that it is irrelevant, but you have to have a voice like mine in the room in order for that type of stuff to get flagged.
Yeah. So somewhere you mentioned that if you don't control the money, that you don't control the narrative.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you explain a little more what you mean by that?
Yeah. So my company, Cinemation Studios, we finance and produce film and television content. So we started financing back in, I would say, 2012, as early as 2012. Films, independent films, a lot of foreign films, and then U.S.-based films, with the intent of bringing those foreign films to the U.S. market from all over the world: France, Germany, Japan, Australia, different places. And finance has always been a part of my life. I didn't get a finance degree or even go to school for it, but my dad was a prolific businessman and a politician and real estate developer later in life, and really taught me about money, him and my mom, about money very early on. And I just realized the power of it and what it really meant, and how controlling it really meant that you can control a lot of your own destiny. So I was always inclined as an entrepreneur, I've always been an entrepreneur, but always inclined as an entrepreneur to really self-finance a lot of my own projects and a lot of things that I end up doing. And I think that for your listeners and your readership, it doesn't necessarily, like when I say that, people automatically think that I'm talking about millions of dollars. Yes, at my level, that is at millions of dollars. But even if somebody wanted to go and make a short film, or somebody wanted to go make a web series or something like that, the value in you using or self-financing that with whatever money that you can cobble together, however much or little it is, will provide you with a enormous degree of control and power in where and when that content is seen, how it's licensed, how it's sold, all of that. And that was always an important part of the equation for me, is to maintain control over that, because ultimately that's really the key, in my opinion, to having all of these elements in the projects that you want: diversity and
But look, you're giving some great information. However, I want to ask you this. Was there a particular audience that you are targeting in making this film? Or did you even think about a specific audience in mind when producing this?
You know, it's a good question. We try to. Anytime you make a film or a television show, you go into it with an audience in mind and the idea of who you might reach. But the reality is that once you're done with it, and it gets released, you are wildly surprised at who's actually paying attention to this stuff. You know, my brother actually sent me a text the other day. It was like, Joe Budden, who has a podcast, a former rapper who has a really amazing podcast platform, mentioned this show, in his podcast. It was actually gave it like a really great review. It was like, all these other documentaries don't even matter. Like, you need to watch this thing. And he was like, wow, that really, I think, speaks to the crossover appeal of the series. And it's not just for a transgender audience. It's not just for an LGBTQ audience, whatever that means, because each one of, there's subsets and groups even within, that community that we've kind of lumped together that have their own taste and their own, niche perspectives. And so I think that you go into it with that in mind, and it might tick a couple of boxes when you go to a network like HBO or Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or any of these types of places. But the reality is that you never know who it is you're going to end up reaching. And I thought that was a real testament to the crossover appeal of the series, is the fact that Joe Budden was talking about it.
Yeah. And of course, in producing or doing anything, you want to have a specific audience, but at the same time, whoever it can actually have some type of good retrospect to where someone or pretty much everybody would get something out of the film.
Yeah, there's something in The Lady in the Dale for everybody. That's for sure. There's the element of family, which is huge, I think, in the Black community. We love stories about families, everything from, mob families in The Godfather to music families in Empire, and families that we see in the reality shows, from the Kardashians to the Real Housewives. There's sort of this element of family that I think we really love. And Liz Carmichael did went through an enormous amount of effort to maintain her family unit and to be the glue that kept everyone together, even when she was on the run and she was going from one city to the next and kind of having to escape justice in one place or clear her name in another. She kept her family together. And so I think that that's something that a lot of my friends and family members who commented on the show have sort of said that to me, that was something that resonated with them. And then, there's something in there for the entrepreneurs. It's about a woman who tries to start a car company in the middle of the 1970s and do it independently, not as part of GM, Ford, or Chrysler. And so that speaks to tenacity and drive, which is a huge element, I think, also in our community too. So there's a lot of pieces and components to this, that there's something there for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you also have a lot of experience in the foreign film market. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In what ways is it different or similar to Hollywood?
The Hollywood really started it all. The format of storytelling in cinema. And so a lot of the foreign market really looks to Hollywood as a means to kind of emulate it and make it work kind of in their local language, depending on the country that you're in. But I think the one thing that's really different between the United States and foreign countries that have produced films in is that most of the other foreign countries have designated grant programs and things like that set aside for artists. So the idea of being a starving artist is actually quite romanticized when you get to France, when you get to Germany, when you get to the UK, because these are independent filmmakers with really, really great ideas that know that they can get their films financed through government incentives and government programs, and then ultimately reach people like me. And so having had some experience with these filmmakers out of multiple places, Mexico, Spain, France, Germany, UK, kind of all over the world, gives me an opportunity to be in business with some really talented filmmakers that, some people just have never heard of. And it's been a real blessing that way. So I like the idea that the kind of government-backed and government-sanctioned arts programs, which I think the U.S. is like really, really missing. And hopefully we'll start to see some of those things come back in the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah. So, listening to what you're saying, so would you say as an independent filmmaker that for those who's looking to branch out in Hollywood, that the foreign countries would be a better way to actually get started before?
I think that as a producer, inspiration comes from multiple sources. So don't just limit yourself to what you see in front of you. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a great book you want to make a movie out of, or maybe there's a great web series that somebody's producing, or you have an original idea that you want to make a movie out of, or a TV series out of. But, the world is a huge, huge place, and the internet, makes it a lot smaller. And so there's a lot of content that you can explore and discover in other territories around the world that just may be ripe for, a U.S. audience. That's really how I got my start in producing live action. I was originally doing animation and visual effects, but then started financing and finding content that I really fell in love with in France, and partnered with some of those producers over there and studios in order to bring it, to the U.S. So yeah, I think it comes from a lot of different places. And as a filmmaker, as a director or an artist, writer, director, a lot of people don't realize that Melvin Van Peebles, who, if anybody knows their film history, was the father of Mario Van Peebles, who really kind of pioneered the blaxploitation era of the 70s with a film called Sweetback's Badass Song. And he couldn't get his movies made in the US. Wow. So he packed up and went to France, just like a lot of artists prior to him, James Baldwin and Josephine Baker, and a lot of people. Paul Robeson ended up packing up, going to France, and was able to, through government incentives and things like that, actually able to get his movie financed and made this film. And it really ended up pioneering this whole era, decades worth of Black content, independent Black content that, started coming out of the studio system and out of independent companies in the United States in the 1970s. And he did that by heading over to foreign countries. So, if you don't have any obligations to be in the U.S., you might be able to find some success in France, Germany, UK, Poland, and a lot of them have diversity initiatives over there that the U.S. can really learn from and emulate to try to spur artistic endeavors here. So yes, I would recommend broadening your horizons for sure.
Yeah. Now, COVID has changed a lot in the industry, not only just the film industry, but in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So what are a few things you miss about, the film and production process, prior to COVID?
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know where to begin for that. Yeah, it's a I mean, I would say the definitely the first and foremost thing that I miss is movie theaters. I'm a cinephile, like I love movies. And I love television too. I produce that too, but I definitely love sitting in a dark room with a bunch of people who all came to see the same thing and are chomping on popcorn and juji fruit and whatever else that people like to eat, and enjoying this kind of cathartic theatrical experience with each other. And the film festivals as well, this doing live festivals and being able to participate in those and kind of hang out with friends and meet new people and hear from new filmmakers and see some great movies. I think community, this thing has shown us the importance of it more than anything, of having that network and that community around you. And frankly, really without that, I think wouldn't have been able to make it through it so successfully. Just having a tribe of friends and family and things like that to kind of quarantine with and stay close with, so we can continue to go over each other's houses and have our kids see each other and things like that. That's really what cinema does, is it brings people together. In the same way music does that, brings people together, and food brings people together. It's like all of those things we want to be able to kind of enjoy. And so I miss that dearly. I hope it'll be back this year in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. It's a hard thing. I mean, we're still producing content, and that's a fairly not easy, but I would say it's a fairly controlled circumstance. I mean, I produced the reboot to Children of the Corn during the initial lockdown of 2020, from March to May of last year. Was one of two movies shooting in the world during the time when everything else had shut down. And so we had the opportunity to really learn a lot of the COVID. Actually, we created a lot of the COVID protocols that are being used now. And so that's a controlled process. People get tested and you kind of have them get sanitized and that sort of thing before coming on set, and quarantining and all that other stuff. And so we can still make content. It's harder to do it than it was in the past. But at the end of the day, the celebration part of seeing the content and the material come out and experiencing that together with people, that's a less controlled environment and circumstance. And so we just have to continue to be vigilant and careful and shelter in place.
Yeah. Let me ask you this as well. Now, as far as your films, your movies, or even your TV programs, do you look for new faces, or how do you go about looking or seeking actors for your productions?
Yeah, so the typical process, just for people to understand how it works, is through an agent when it comes to finding actors. A lot of actors who don't have representation, either through an agent or manager or even an attorney, will sometimes submit to an open casting call on, just like Craigslist or Central Casting, or kind of any one of these platforms that you can go to when you want to do a non-union project. And I think for me, as on the writing and producing and directing side, I'd never dismiss anything, any project that comes my way. The Lady in the Dale was the perfect example of this. I mean, this is a project that came out of clear blue sky. It's the only unsolicited inquiry that I've ever answered to this day, meaning that it didn't come, through an agent or manager. It just, came directly from the creator. And if I was dismissive of that, I think Nick reached out to like 1,000 producers, and Alan and I were the ones that happened to respond. So, the rest of them dismissed it and didn't pay attention to it or put it away. And a year into the process, some of those producers Nick said came back asking, hey, whatever happened to this project? Are you working on it? And it's like, yeah, I'm in the middle of it right now, you know, working with these guys, and didn't reveal any details of where it went or anything like that. But it's really just a perfect example of the enormous amount of content and the enormous amount of great stories that are out there. And it's prior to that, I wasn't dismissive of anything that people pitched me, and after that, I'm even more open and receptive to the projects that people pitch me, because you just never know.
Yeah, right. So what advice would you give to, you know, we have many young aspiring producers, creators, directors, writers. What advice can you basically give to those who's looking to, or better yet, or what information or advice can you give to them, even if they face rejections? You know, because a lot of people cannot deal with that part of it when they are.
That's true.
You know? So
yeah.
And there's a lot out there, and that's one reason I love having these kind of questions answered, because I'm one of those true believers that love to open up doors and have opportunities for these, you know, new beginners, these new faces, people that are striving to get to where you are. And a lot of these other, you know, celebrities and, you know, executive producers or what have you. So.
Yeah, you know, I think that one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received early in my career, when I was in film school, actually, at NYU, was from a writer who said you really need to paint, you know, wallpaper your wall with rejection letters and rejection slips. You know, this writer, who I won't necessarily give away who it is, but is a very successful writer, and they, you know, were first published, first got their material published as a novel, and then ultimately became a screenwriter and a television writer. But said that once she got over the reality that it takes 1,000 rejections but all you need is one yes.
Yeah.
you know, you don't need 1,000 yeses. You just need one.
Yeah.
And so wading through that does make your skin tougher. Does give, you know, and either it, for some people, for a lot of people, like you said, it will just kind of break them and they'll just sort of give up and disappear. But the ones that make it are the ones that don't give up. And it's not necessarily that they're the most brilliant people on planet Earth. I mean, I can point to a whole host of different filmmakers from my program, which was a conservatory. It was only 15 students that were brilliant, you know, that were some of the best writers and directors and producers that you can ever come across, actors, but ended up giving up at some point. And the difference between them and folks like me is just not giving it up and really staying persistent when you do get those rejections. And so it's really just part of it, you know, just kind of collecting some no's and collecting some passes with the reality that, okay, you know, that person passed on it, but the next one might not, and the next one might not, and then eventually somebody says yes. And that's really the best piece of advice that I could give, is just stay with it, just really stick with it. That's really the main difference between people working in Hollywood and the ones who aren't, is that the ones who are just were bullish about not abandoning it and really just staying there and going through all the ups and downs that come your way, but just saying, you know, I'm not going to give it up. And that's really the main difference. I think that's the main difference between successful people and not successful people, period. Because there's just a lot of successful people that, again, they're not the most brilliant people on planet Earth. But they had an idea and they believed in it and they stuck with it, and they stuck with it long enough that it paid off, you know.
And they didn't let those rejections stop them from doing what they were seeking to do.
Nope. It's just part of it, you know. It's like you got to do a little bit of this and just say, you know, that's just part of it. And the beauty of it is that all of these creators in the world, there's room for all of us, you know. There's room for everybody. I mean, with more platforms now than we ever had, more television stations, networks, channels, streaming channels, and I mean, there's just more places than ever to actually tell your story. And you know, there's these success stories we hear from social media, from Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, and of people just telling their stories and then finding their way into a mainstream television channel like HBO or something like that. And so my advice is just encouragement, you know, to just stick with it, not give up, and keep trying, and eventually it will happen.
Absolutely. So what's next for Andre Gaines?
Yeah, so the film I shot last year, which was the reboot to Children of the Corn, Stephen King, that'll be coming out.
Really?
Yeah, that'll be coming out later this year. I can't say where yet. I haven't made an announcement of it, but then also producing this film, which I've been working on for a very long time, about Dick Gregory, the late great, you know, comedian and activist. Yeah. And that also will be coming out later this year. So it's going to be a busy year for sure.
Yeah, that is awesome. So awesome. Look, I truly enjoyed this conversation with you. You have given some great information to everyone that's listening. But is there anything else that you can share with everyone before we end our conversation?
Yeah, you know, I think just reiterating making stuff. You know, just making content. I think that before the barriers of entry had to do with access to the technology, and now your cell phone is a motion picture camera. I mean, and I mean that quite literally. You know, most television broadcasts that people don't realize when they look at the news, you know, they're shot on iPhones. Yeah. And they're high enough quality to actually go on television, and they're high enough quality to go on a big gigantic screen in a movie theater. And people are doing some amazing things. Photographers, directors of photography, you know, cinematographers, these guys are doing some amazing things with iPhones. And so that little device that you're carrying around in your pocket is the, you know, most powerful tool ever invented. And so I think that when people look at it and say, well, it's insurmountable, I can never get there, can't do that, just start making content, write some scripts, get some actors, go out there and shoot something and put it up on YouTube, put it up on, you know, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all these places, because producers like me are constantly scrolling through these platforms, Vimeo, you know, constantly scrolling through, looking for great content and new voices. So I think that's the great equalizer now, and I would encourage people to do it.
Yeah, wonderful. So like I said, once again, I truly enjoyed this conversation. It was great and wonderful. And I hope that we will have this opportunity again, especially when these other films comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, truly, I just wish you the very best. And one thing I want to leave with you, Andre, your voice truly matters.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope your viewers tune into The Lady in the Dale on HBO Max.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, most definitely. And they can see that it's playing right now. Is that
yeah, all 4 episodes are available right now or on HBO Max. Yep.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well,
thank you so much. Okay, great. And I'll see you soon.
Same here. God bless
you. You too. Bye-bye.